Hello and welcome back to the Mindset Project podcast. My name is Lewis Conde and my aim is to give you the tools to develop and improve your mindset. By drawing on my own experiences as a competitive swimmer, as well as the opinions and experiences of other incredible individuals, I hope to expose you to an alternative way of thinking. And in doing so, I hope that inspires some sort of personal growth. I believe that through mindset development, we can strive physically, mentally and emotionally. I hope you're all doing well, staying positive and staying healthy. So let's get on to it. Hello and welcome back to the Mindset Project podcast. Now, I'm not quite sure what I really want to put in these sort of intro parts of the podcast, or the episodes, should I say. But I think it'd be kind of good to have some sort of like reflection of what I've been feeling the past week, just because obviously if I kind of reflect and, I've had like a shit week, then if you're listening, you'd be like, oh, it's fine, Lewis has had a shit week, it's fine as well. That sort of thing, and I think it's kind of good just to get it out there, but yeah, there's not really much to reflect upon this week, just because I decided to have like an easier week this week in terms of training, just because the past 7 or 8 weeks I've kind of been non-stop, and because of the type of gym membership I've got now, I'm having to do double sessions, so it's very like tiring, and I think it's just kind of caught up with me this week. And I just thought, I'm just going to have an easy week, rest, chill, which, is good, obviously, because I can rest up, recover, and get back to training as I used to. But at the same time, like, I really need to be doing something. Like, I can't be sitting about doing nothing, but sometimes that is what you have to do. Sometimes the things that are tough and are hard are the things that you have to do in order to make progress. So that's kind of like my little reflection for this week. In terms of this episode, this week I kind of wanted to talk about the tool of mindfulness. And the thing about mindfulness is that it's so simple, yet it's very, very powerful. And mindfulness is basically the ability to be present and being aware of where we are and our surroundings. And it's about what we're doing and not being overwhelmed with like sort of like thoughts and stuff and those things happening around us. And when I think about it, I always say on this podcast, like, I want to get you to start thinking differently, or at least in a different way about things around you. And so I'm basically, through the podcast, I'm basically trying to promote some sort of mindfulness, if that makes sense. And unlike other techniques, mindfulness is something we actually naturally possess. And whenever we bring awareness to what we're directly experiencing through our senses, so, smell, taste, sight, sound, touch, that sort of thing, we're being mindful because we're being aware of the things around us. Like, if we listen to the birds singing, or if we feel the grass on our feet or whatever, because we're being aware of that, that's us being mindful. And being mindful is also being aware of our own state of mind. So, like, if you just close your eyes and just listen to your thoughts, that's also being mindful. And there's also growing evidence to show that when we practice being mindful, we can actually remodel the physical structures of our brains. Now, I don't think that means, being mindful, you can actually like grow your brain bigger, but I think it, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think it basically means you can kind of rewire your neurons and potentially your subconscious, which, going back to last week's episode talking about the law of attraction, that was one of the things that I was talking about. You want to like reprogram your paradigm or your subconscious to start putting out a frequency to kind of attract what you're hoping to attract. And for me personally, I think being mindful is one of the best things that we can actually do. Because of its nature, we're being aware of the things around us as well as our thoughts. And what I find is that it kind of controls a lot of my crazy thoughts. That often is what makes me sort of anxious. Obviously, anxiety is sometimes like we're trying to like think of something that's not really happening. So if we have lots of those, we're going to be more anxious. and mindfulness kind of counteracts that in a way. And I said this before, but I believe that when people are feeling anxious about something, it's because they're either A, thinking about something that has already happened. For example, it's in the past, so we can't actually really do anything about it. Or B, they are thinking about something that is in the future, i.e. something that hasn't happened yet, but we still can't do anything about it. And mindfulness is about being in the present and thinking about now and everything in the present. I think that's why it works, for at least for me personally. And when we start to think about the past or the future, now I don't know how accurate this theory is, but we're going to roll with it. But I feel like our brains aren't actually designed to think in the past or the future, which I think is why we kind of get anxiety. And it's almost like our brains are trying to compute something or process something, but it can't, because it's either happened or it hasn't happened yet. So we can't process it, if that makes sense. And it's almost like if you have a games console, for example, if you have the most up-to-date games console, if you try to put like an older game in, then it might not actually work, because obviously this is a more up-to-date games console, and obviously you can't put in a brand like a new game that's going to be coming out in the future into that program, because this is the current technology that we have in that games console. So the game that you get from the future is not going to work, because this console is not designed for that, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like our brains. If we try to think about something that's in the past, then it's going to have a negative impact on our present. The same if we stress about something that might happen in the future. You know, it might happen, it might not happen, but we always seem to think that it's going to happen, but it might not. So that's kind of like my analogy. And mindfulness is about bringing us into the present, and it's almost like grounding us or anchoring us in the present. And I know in my experience, when I think about the things I'm doing in the now, in the present, I feel far more content, if that makes sense. And like I said, I just feel far more aligned, and that my mental state is far better than if I was worrying about something that has happened or something which hasn't. I also don't think mindfulness has like some sort of definite definition, because it really differs person to person. Some people might like doing it one way, some might be like doing it another way. And for me personally, I normally incorporate mindfulness into my yoga practice, because one, yoga is actually really good for you mentally anyway. So obviously putting that into your yoga practice kind of like adds a little depth to it, if that makes sense. Secondly, in yoga you actually really need to focus on your breathing a lot, so you already have that sense of awareness anyway. Like if you do mindfulness in the simplest form, you're going to have to think about your breathing. Like you're going to have to think about the air going in, the air coming out, because obviously that's you being mindful. And lastly, the focus you need in yoga is actually quite high anyway, so you do need to place your hands or feet in a particular place. So again, you have to have awareness there anyway. So doing yoga and mindfulness kind of, for me, they go like hand in hand, because I guess they're kind of the same in a way. Some people might like just sitting in a dark room, eyes shut, and just focus on their external environment. And the good thing about doing it in a dark room is that obviously when it's dark, our senses are heightened. So I think when you do it in a dark room, it kind of heightens the sort of intensity of your mindfulness, if that makes sense. Like you're more aware of your breathing, and you're more aware of the sounds around you, the feelings, I guess, if it depends where you're sitting, I guess, what you feel about around you. And you know, some people might like doing it in nature. Like that's another good example, because being in nature, you can really focus on your senses. Like what can you hear? Can you hear birds singing? Can you hear the wind? Are you on a beach? Can you hear the oceans coming in, oceans going out? Can you feel grass? Can you feel sand? can you taste anything? Sometimes you can like taste something in the air. And when I describe this, you might be thinking that sounds a lot like visualization from my previous episode on it. But the thing with it, visualization, is you're trying to focus on something that you want to happen. So you're kind of trying to create an image or something in your head of something that you want to happen. So it could be you lifting a certain weight in the gym. It could be reaching a national final in a sport, whatever. And you're kind of using your feelings to kind of enhance that image, if that makes sense. Whereas mindfulness is all about focusing on the present. So you're not focusing on any external image. You're not really trying to create anything new. You're just sitting down, thinking about it's kind of like an internal awareness, I guess, because you're using your senses to kind of figure out what's going on around you, I guess that's a good way to say it. And the funny thing is that these sort of methods of improving your mindset aren't really that trivial. Like, they're really not that complicated, and they're actually really simple, and in most cases they just require you to focus on your mental awareness. And take the law of attraction, for example. We've talked about that a little bit in this episode. An example is, a lot of people think it's like this some sort of like new thing. It's like some sort of craze, because it's in every sort of self-help book, but it's not really. And it has just I think it's just became more prominent in the media, and it's probably become a bit more popular as well in society, because people are starting to realise that they're starting to realise the benefits of this technique. And with mindfulness, it doesn't require us to add anything new to our lives or routines. And like I've just said before, we already have the capacity to do it. Like, we're probably mindful at times of the day that we don't really even realise, but when you become more mindful, you know that you're doing it, if that makes sense. So it's almost like you're directing the mindfulness, if that makes sense. And what we need to do is just focus on those moments in the present. And another point to add is that doing mindfulness, you don't actually have to change who you are or who we are, because mindfulness recognises who we are as individuals and as human beings, and it kind of uses that to almost enhance the mindfulness experience, I guess you could call it that. But I've been saying for years that there needs to be some sort of like mindfulness education in schools across the country, or even perhaps across the world, because we are going through a mental health crisis. And I think that it was partly down to the pace at which society is going, because obviously we have like new iPhones every year, we have new game consoles every year, we're developing technology to get things done quicker. Everything just seems to be like going at 100 miles per hour. And social media, it just feels like we're being completely bombarded with information, and obviously that can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people. I mean, if you do like a crash course in anything, then it is going to be overwhelming. And teenagers, and in some cases children, are being exposed to like the world of social media, and at a much younger age. Like, I don't think that social media was a big thing when I was growing up as a child. Like, I don't think I had Facebook and Instagram until I was like 12 or 13. But now you have like children who are like 9 or 10 who have YouTube channels. Like, it's absolutely crazy. And like we even have kids who have iPhones or sitting in front of tablets like 24/7. Like, I don't even think I had a phone when I was like 12, never mind younger than that. But that's the world we live in now, and it's absolutely crazy. And when I was growing up, we literally went outside to play. If we didn't even have anything, we would just make our own like sort of games up. And there was always some sort of minority who would stay inside and play computer games or play on their laptop. But nowadays, that's like the opposite way around. Like, you'll get a minority of children going out to play because the majority of teenagers are inside on their phones, on their tablets, binging Netflix. Not that binging Netflix is necessarily a bad thing, but you get what I'm saying. And I guess you could say, like, the barrage of information being thrown at us daily, our brains can't really process all that information. Like, one thing I've kind of struggled with, I guess, the past few months is, like, I've been trying to, like, read a book, but because there's so much going on, like, my phone goes all the time, even if it's on silent. Like, I just feel like I need to check it. Like, I can't really focus on reading the book because there's always some sort of distraction there. Like, there's some sort of, like, something that's coming in all the time, and it's just, like, completely crazy. And, like, in school we're taught things like sex education, we're taught about using drugs, well, not using drugs, but obviously what not to use, if that makes sense. But where is the education on mental health or the ways to cope with mental health? Like, I think schools are really missing out on an opportunity here, because you have, in high school, you're going to be doing your exams for the first time. So obviously for some students that's going to be very daunting and very nerve-wracking. Whereas if you teach them mental health coping mechanisms, i.e. mindfulness, then you might actually be able to combat that anxiety, that nervousness, and in doing so, when they actually do their exams, they may actually be more focused and they may actually do better in the exam than if they didn't. So I think schools really need to look at their curriculum and be like, well, we need to introduce something, because we're in a mental health crisis, especially for children. And then if we don't teach these kids how to cope with that, then what can we actually do? Because the thing is as well, we can't really rely on mental health psychologists through the NHS, because that's just going to put a burden on them. So I think you've got to kind of give children the tools, and education is a great way to kind of help people understand. And obviously if we have that understanding, it makes things a lot easier. So definitely I think there should be some sort of mental health in the curriculum, or mindfulness, or at least something, just to give children the tools, because mental health is going to affect you every single day. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, and it's normally when you have a bad day you don't actually know what really to do. But obviously if you have that sort of education, then the bad days aren't as bad as they may be. And I think as well, like, you might do, at the minute, I think you might do one lesson on mental health when it's like Mental Health Awareness Week. But one thing is, one lesson is not enough to cover everything that there is to know about mental health coping mechanisms. Like, there just has to be better education, I think, for mental health and mental health coping mechanisms in schools particularly. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and one other thing to mention about mindfulness is that it is actually a way of living. When we start to practice mindfulness daily, we actually begin to become more aware of everything that we do. So when you kind of start out doing mindfulness, it's normally going to be something simple. So like if you lie down or sit down, you're going to shut your eyes and you're just going to focus on your breathing. Like, that's as simple as it is, right? So you just focus on your breathing, focus on the air coming in, focus on the air coming out, focus on anything that you can hear. Are you sitting on grass? Is it a carpet? Think about what you feel in your skin, that sort of thing. And then, but when you do that more often, what you find is that when you do certain tasks, say for example if you're putting in the washing, you become more aware of your actions as well. So you actually become more aware of putting the peg on the clothes horse. You become more aware of lifting that up, putting it into a basket. Mindfulness is like one of these things where as soon as you start it kind of like opens up this whole like range of doors and so many things, and it actually changes your life. And I actually think mindfulness is probably the first step towards meditation, because meditation is really about finding some sort of almost like trance state, kind of like it's almost like tapping into your subconscious, but you're still in control. But in order to kind of reach that, or at least start that process, you're going to have to be mindful of your breathing, even your muscles as well. Like a lot of, if you do guided meditations videos on YouTube, a lot of them focus on, they try to get you to think about your muscles, and they try to get you to think about your muscles actually relaxing. So if you actually focus on thinking about, the muscles in your legs relaxing, then that starts to happen. That's like mindfulness. And that brings me to the end of the episode, I think. There's not really a lot to say about mindfulness. Like, again, it's really, really simple. There's probably like people out there who could talk about mindfulness every day, like for as long as they have to. There's probably people who like study mindfulness. But yeah, like I'm just sharing my knowledge and what I've used in my experience. But yeah, mindfulness is like a great technique that I advise you to use, just because even if I don't think it's one of these things where you don't actually need it just to fix poor mental health or poor mindset. Like, even if your mindset is good and your mental health is good, still do it, because it can get your if you're going through life, everything's great, whatever. If you start doing mindfulness, it's just going to level you up, level up your life. But if you are doing it for to improve your mental health or improve your mindset, as soon as you get a good mental health and you get a good mindset, don't just stop, keep doing it, because mindset and mental health is something that you need to maintain. Obviously, again, you're going to have bad mental health days, right? What goes up must come down. But what you need to be able to do is be able to kind of manage those down days, if that makes sense. And sometimes as well, if I've had a really good long period of everything's going smoothly, everything's going well, then I kind of know that that's not going to last. Sometimes it does, sometimes you can have a good run for about 4 weeks, 5-6 weeks, whatever, but then you'll have some shitty moment, and that's normal, that's going to happen. And sometimes if that is the case, you can kind of prepare yourself for it to happen. One quote I do is regression to the mean, which basically means that no matter how good or bad a situation is, it'll always manage to even itself out. So if you're having a really, really good day, you're getting all this good news, you're getting good mental health days, whatever, then you might get really, really bad news. But on the opposite end, if everything's just not going your way, you wake up every morning, your days are going shit, everyone's arguing with you, that sort of thing, you might eventually, you're going to have a good day, and that's going to counteract that and kind of even itself out, so to speak. So yeah, that's just going to have me conclude this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like I said, mindfulness is a very good tool. It's not very complex at all. Most of the things in life, the simple things in life, are the things that are going to have the biggest impact, and mindfulness is one of those. So with that, I'll say stay positive, stay fit, stay safe, and I shall see you on the next one.